Every family has its secrets, and some of them are buried so deep that even the most loving ones don't know they exist. But what happens when the truth starts to surface? When an innocent photo holds a message far darker than anyone could imagine? Emma's summer getaway is about to unravel a web of lies, and the truth could change everything. Stay with us. The journey is about to get twisted. Emma stood by the front door, her backpack slung over her shoulder, looking up at her mother. Jennifer's eyes were bloodshot, as if she hadn't slept in days, but her smile was as bright and fake as it could get. "You'll have so much fun, sweetie. The camp will do you good." She said it in that tone mothers use when they try to convince themselves as much as their kids. Emma forced a smile, her stomach twisting into knots. She hadn't wanted to go. Ever since her grandparents died, the weight of loneliness had settled like a thick fog in their small house. But her mother insisted. "It'll help you heal," she'd said. Heal? Emma wasn't sure if anyone could heal from the loss they'd endured, but she wasn't going to argue. So with reluctance, she packed her things, kissed her mother on the cheek, and boarded the bus. The drive to the camp was long and silent. The windows were open, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. Emma leaned her head against the glass, watching the endless rows of trees blur by. She felt detached from everything, from her life, from her mother, and even from herself. A part of her resented the idea of being sent away. The camp was supposed to be a break, a place to forget. But could you ever truly forget? As the bus pulled into the campgrounds, Emma took in the vast landscape. Surrounded by towering pines and a shimmering lake, the camp looked like a place out of a movie, peaceful, perfect, and strangely unreal. It was the kind of place that made you want to forget your troubles, but Emma wasn't sure she could. There, waiting to greet the newcomers, were Diane and Harold. They were older, their faces weathered with time, but there was something strangely comforting about them. Diane had soft eyes, warm and inviting, and Harold, with his white hair and gentle smile, looked like someone who could offer advice without ever judging. They were the camp counselors, but they felt like grandparents. They made Emma feel like she was someone important, even though she wasn't sure why. Throughout the first few days, Emma grew fond of them. They would sit with her by the lake, listening to her talk about her life, about her mom, and about the empty space left behind by the loss of her grandparents. Diane always nodded sympathetically, while Harold told funny stories about his own childhood. They laughed together, and for the first time in a long while Emma felt at peace. But something in the back of her mind nagged at her. There was something off about them, a familiarity in the way they looked at her, the way they talked to her. It wasn't just affection. It felt like something more, something hidden beneath the surface. One night, after a long day of hiking, Emma sat alone by the campfire, her phone in hand. Her mother had been texting her all day, asking about her experience. She hadn't mentioned how lonely she felt. Emma didn't want to worry her. Instead, she decided to send her a selfie. She tilted her phone and smiled, snapping a picture with Diane and Harold standing beside her. The picture was perfect, the firelight flickering behind them, the cool night air making the world seem still. She added a caption, "Having fun with my grandparents. They're teaching me how to fish." Emma sent it off before she could think twice. A wave of exhaustion hit her, and she lay back on the grass, staring up at the stars. The simple act of sending a picture to her mother felt like a weight had been lifted. She didn't have to pretend anymore. The camp wasn't so bad. She was starting to enjoy herself. Back at home, Jennifer's phone buzzed. She stared at the picture of her daughter, smiling alongside the two older adults. The relief she'd hoped to feel never came. Instead, a chill ran down her spine. The expression on Emma's face didn't quite seem genuine. It was forced, almost like she was trying too hard to be happy. And Diane and Harold, something about them felt too familiar. Jennifer's eyes widened as she zoomed in on Harold's face. His eyes, those dark, piercing eyes, were strikingly similar to someone she knew. But who? Her pulse quickened. She zoomed in further, studying every detail of the photo. She couldn't place it, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. Something wasn't right. She looked at the picture again, her mind racing. Diane's warm smile, Harold's kindly eyes. It was like looking at a ghost from the past. But that was impossible. The grandparents Emma had lost, they were gone, dead, long gone. Jennifer's hands trembled as she lowered her phone. She had seen something in Harold's eyes, something buried deep within the folds of memory. A truth, hidden for so long, suddenly felt within reach, but it was just out of her grasp. A cold, sick feeling settled in her stomach. This was no ordinary camp, and those weren't just ordinary counselors. Something was happening, something bigger than she could comprehend. Something from the past was coming back to find Emma, and now, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that her daughter was in danger. The days at the camp stretched on, but Emma's sense of peace was slowly eroding. At first, it had been easy to ignore the oddities, the way Diane and Harold seemed to know things about her life that they shouldn't, or how they spoke of her parents with an unsettling familiarity. They were kind, too kind, and it made Emma uncomfortable, but she didn't want to think too much about it. After all, they were just old people who cared, right? Still, as she spent more time with them, she began to notice small things that didn't add up. Diane would casually ask her about her mother's childhood, about family holidays, about things that Emma knew she'd never mentioned. Harold would laugh it off, saying things like, "Oh, she's just like her mother," always hiding things. Emma didn't know what to make of it, but it was starting to bother her. One afternoon, while they were sitting by the lake, Harold asked her, "Do you ever think about the past, Emma? The things you don't remember?" Emma had been gazing out at the water, but the question snapped her attention back to him. She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well, sometimes there are things buried deep inside us, things we forget, or maybe things we're meant to forget," Diane said, her voice soft but with an edge of something Emma couldn't place. Emma didn't know how to respond. She shook her head. "I don't really think about it." "Good," Harold said quickly, his tone suddenly sharp. "Good, you shouldn't." Emma's heart raced. The conversation had taken a strange turn, one that didn't feel like it was about her at all, but about something much bigger. She wasn't sure why, but she suddenly felt like she was being watched, as if everything she did, everything she said was under a microscope. That night, unable to shake the uneasy feeling, Emma wandered outside to clear her head. The campgrounds were quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. She was lost in thought when she saw Diane and Harold talking in the distance, their voices low, almost conspiratorial. Curiosity gnawed at her, and despite the voice in her head urging her to turn back, Emma crept closer, just out of sight. "Have you told her yet?" Diane's voice was barely audible. Harold's reply was even softer. "No, not yet. She's not ready." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Told her what?" Diane sighed. "We can't wait much longer. She's going to remember soon, you know. The truth is going to come out. It's already happening." Emma's stomach twisted into a knot. She didn't understand what they were talking about, but she didn't like the way it sounded. The truth? What truth? Before she could hear more, she heard a noise behind her, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. She turned quickly and found one of the other campers walking by, a teenager named Kyle, who didn't seem to notice her at all. She watched him pass, and when she turned back to the spot where Diane and Harold had been, they were gone. That night, Emma lay in her bunk, staring up at the ceiling, her mind racing. The camp, which had once seemed like an escape, was beginning to feel like a prison. She was trapped in a game, and the rules were becoming clearer but more dangerous by the second. The next day, after another long hike, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. She had to know what was going on. So, with no real plan in mind, she went to the camp office where the camp director, Mr. Dawson, was sitting behind a desk, reading through some papers. "Mr. Dawson," Emma said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, his stern face softening when he saw her. "Of course, Emma, what's on your mind? Do you know Diane and Harold very well?" She kept her voice steady, but the question felt like it carried more weight than she expected. Dawson's eyes tightened for a moment, as if he was caught off guard by the question. He cleared his throat. "Yes, they've been here for years. They're good people." "Good people," Emma repeated, but the way he said it made her feel uneasy. Do they ever talk about my family? About my mom?" Dawson's gaze flickered briefly, and Emma could have sworn she saw a shadow of something cross his face. "Not much. They mostly keep to themselves." But Emma wasn't convinced. His answer was too rehearsed, too careful. She pressed further. "But they seem to know a lot about me, about my mom, more than they should." There was a long pause, and for a moment Emma thought Dawson might tell her something important. But then he cleared his throat again, standing up from his desk. "It's just the way they are. Emma, they've seen a lot of kids come and go over the years. They care, that's all. But if you're uncomfortable, you should talk to your mother. She's the one who sent you here, after all." The mention of her mother felt like a slap in the face. She hadn't told Jennifer anything about what was happening at the camp. She hadn't said a word about Diane and Harold's strange behavior. But now, the unease that had settled in Emma's chest was almost unbearable. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination or if there really was something wrong. She turned to leave, but Dawson's voice stopped her. "Be careful, Emma. Sometimes the past is better left untouched." The warning hung in the air like a cloud. Emma didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing: she couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was out there, and she had to find it before it was too late. That night she couldn't sleep. The cabin felt too small, the walls too close. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from her mom. "How's the camp going, honey? Love you." For a moment, Emma felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't told Jennifer about the strange things happening, about Diane and Harold. She hadn't said anything. But now she wasn't sure what to say. Instead of replying immediately, she stared at the message, torn between telling her mother the truth and keeping her in the dark. And as she looked at the glowing screen in the dim light, she realized one thing. Something was happening. Something dark. Something that would change everything. But what could she do? The following morning, Emma woke to a sense of impending dread. The camp felt different now. The air was heavier, the trees taller and more menacing. Diane and Harold had taken on an almost ghostly presence in her life. They were always there, always watching, as if they were waiting for something. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the camp was full of secrets. Secrets that weren't meant to be uncovered. That day, the camp counselors took the group on a nature hike. Emma was quiet, drifting to the back of the group, lost in her own thoughts. She couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had overheard between Diane and Harold. What did they mean by the truth coming out? What truth? And why had Dawson warned her to leave the past untouched? As they walked through the dense woods, Emma couldn't help but glance around, half expecting someone to jump out of the shadows and tell her everything. But nothing happened. No one spoke to her. Everyone seemed too caught up in their own world. When they reached a clearing near a river, the group stopped for a break. Emma, who had been drifting in her own mind, suddenly found herself alone on the edge of the clearing. Her eyes caught a glimpse of something. A small, weathered wooden cabin. It stood just beyond the trees, hidden from view. She had never seen it before. Yet something about it felt familiar, almost like it had been there her whole life. Against her better judgment, Emma made her way toward the cabin. She knew she shouldn't go, that it was dangerous to wander off alone, but something pulled her in, an irresistible force she couldn't explain. The closer she got to the cabin, the more she could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her. The air was thick, charged with the weight of secrets long buried. When she reached the door, her breath caught in her throat. The cabin was old, its wood rotting and weathered by time, but the door was slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for her. She pushed it open slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, the cabin was dusty, the air stale, but something was different. There was a presence here, something that made her skin crawl. Her eyes fell on a photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. It was a black and white photo of a family, a woman, a man, and a young girl. The woman and man looked familiar, but it wasn't the photograph itself that sent a chill down Emma's spine. It was the girl. The girl in the picture looked just like her. Same hair, same eyes. Emma felt as if she were looking into a mirror from the past. She reached for the photo, her hands trembling. Her fingers brushed against the frame, and she felt a sudden wave of nausea wash over her. This was too much. It couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake. But as she held the photo in her hands, she saw something that made her blood run cold. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faded ink, was a name, Jennifer, her mother's name. Emma's mind reeled. She couldn't breathe. What was this? Why was her mother's name on the back of this photo? The girl in the picture. It was her. But how? Why? The sound of footsteps behind her snapped her back to reality. She turned, her heart racing. Diane was standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Emma?" Diane asked, her voice calm, almost too calm. Emma's throat went dry. "Who are these people?" she asked, holding up the photo. "Why is my mother's name written on the back?" Diane's eyes flickered, a hint of something darker passing over her face. She stepped into the cabin, closing the door behind her. "That's not for you to know," she said softly. Emma stepped back, clutching the photograph tightly in her hands. "No," she said, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. I need to know what's going on here. Why do you know so much about my mum? Why do you know so much about me?" Diane didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on Emma, as if weighing her words. Finally she spoke, her voice low and urgent. "There are things you don't remember, things that were buried for your own protection. You're not ready to understand." Emma shook her head. "I am ready. I deserve to know the truth." Diane's face hardened. "The truth is dangerous. It will destroy everything you think you know. But I need to know," Emma pressed, her hands shaking as she gripped the photograph. "Who is that girl? Why does she look like me, and why is my mom's name on the back of the photo?" Diane's eyes softened for just a moment before she sighed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of something heavy. "That girl is someone you were supposed to forget. She's part of your past, Emma. A past you can't go back to." Emma stared at her, bewildered. "What do you mean? What past?" Diane took a step closer, lowering her voice. "There's more to your family than you know, more than your mother ever told you. You were born into a world that was never safe for you, Emma, and those who tried to protect you, they paid the price. Before Emma could respond, the door to the cabin slammed open and Harold stepped inside, his face grim. "Diane, we need to go," he said urgently. Diane turned to him, her expression tense. "Not yet. She needs to know." "No," Harold said firmly. "It's not the time. If she knows too much, it will be worse for all of us." Diane hesitated, her eyes flickering between Emma and Harold. "But she deserves the truth. She deserves to know why we're here." Harold shook his head. "Not yet. Not until it's safe." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the two older adults exchanged tense glances. It was clear now. They were hiding something monumental, and Emma was at the center of it all. Harold's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's time to go, Emma. We'll talk later. But you need to stay away from this cabin. It's not safe." Emma didn't argue. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning with questions that had no answers. As they left the cabin, Emma felt a strange sense of dread settle into her bones. Whatever truth she was chasing, it was slipping further away with each passing moment. And the more she learned, the more she realized nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Emma woke up to a strange stillness. It was as if the entire camp had suddenly become quieter, more oppressive. The usual sounds of birds chirping, the soft rustling of the trees, and the laughter of campers felt distant. The energy had shifted overnight, and Emma could feel it in her bones. The air was thick with unspoken words, and she couldn't ignore the weight of the secrets she had uncovered the night before. She hadn't told anyone about the photograph or her encounter with Diane and Harold. Part of her still wasn't sure if she could trust what she had seen. The strange connection between her mother's name and the photograph of the young girl that looked so much like her. The fear of the unknown clung to her like a shadow, and every step she took felt like it was leading her closer to something she wasn't prepared to understand. The day began with a usual group activity, but Emma's mind wasn't on the hike or the games they played. Her thoughts were racing, circling back to the cabin and the warning Diane had given her. The truth would destroy everything she thought she knew. But why? What was so dangerous about the truth that had to be kept from her? During lunch, she sat at a corner table poking at her food but not really tasting it. Her eyes kept drifting toward Diane and Harold, who were standing across the campfire, speaking in hushed tones, their backs turned to the rest of the group. Every time she glanced in their direction, they seemed to grow more distant, their conversations more intense. Emma had an overwhelming urge to confront them again, to demand answers, but something inside her kept telling her to wait. There had to be more. After lunch, as the other campers went off to their activities, Emma decided to go back to the cabin. It felt like the only place she could find some clarity. She knew it was risky, but the questions were eating at her from the inside, and she had to know more. The cabin felt like the key to everything, the piece of the puzzle that would make sense of all the confusion swirling in her head. When she arrived at the cabin, the door was once again ajar, as if waiting for her. She stepped inside cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was exactly as it had been the night before, dusty and old, but now there was a sense of finality in the air. The silence was almost deafening. Emma's eyes immediately went to the photograph again, still hanging crookedly on the wall. This time she didn't hesitate to walk over to it. Her hand reached for the photo, and as she studied it more closely, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the bottom corner of the frame was a date. It was written in small faded ink, July 17th, 1986. Her breath caught in her throat. The date was significant. She didn't know why, but she felt it deep in her gut. She had to find out why. She turned the photo over and studied the back, where her mother's name was scrawled in faint handwriting. But beneath it, there was another name, Diane Mitchell. It was a name Emma recognized. It was the same as the woman who had become a second grandmother to her at the camp. But why was her name on the back of this old photograph? Emma's pulse quickened. She was no longer sure who to trust. Was Diane involved in something much darker than Emma could have ever imagined? What was the connection between her mother, Diane, and the photograph? The door creaked open, and Emma turned, heart racing. Harold was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was palpable. "I warned you not to come here," Harold said, his voice low and controlled. Emma's hands shook as she held up the photograph. "I need answers. Why is Diane's name on the back of this picture? And why does that girl look like me? This doesn't make any sense." Harold's gaze flickered briefly to the photo in her hands, and for the first time his expression softened. He stepped into the cabin, closing the door behind him, and walked toward her. His presence was almost suffocating, and Emma felt herself instinctively step back. "That girl," Harold began, his voice heavy with unspoken history, "was someone you were never supposed to remember. Her name was Sarah. She was your sister. Emma's breath caught in her throat. My sister? She could barely force the words out. But I don't have a sister. You did, Harold said quietly, his eyes filled with something that could only be described as regret. A long time ago, a part of your family's past that was buried for your own safety. Emma shook her head in disbelief. No, this doesn't make sense. How could I not know this? How could my mum not tell me? Harold sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of years was pressing down on him. Your mother, Jennifer, she had to make a choice. A choice between keeping you safe and keeping the truth from you. And for years she thought that was the best thing to do, but now, he paused, his voice breaking. Now, the past is catching up to you. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stood frozen, her mind reeling. She tried to process what he had just said, but it was like trying to hold water in her hands. A sister? A sister she never knew about? And why had her mother kept this from her? Why had no one ever told her? I know this is hard to understand, Emma, Harold continued, his tone low, but your family has been running from something for a long time. From people who would do anything to control your mother. To control you. Emma's thoughts spun as she absorbed his words. What do you mean? Who's been controlling us? Harold's expression darkened. There's a lot about your mother's past that she's never shared. She was part of something, a group of people with power. And Sarah, your sister, was part of that world too, but she didn't make it out alive. The words hung in the air like a poison, settling into Emma's chest, making it harder to breathe. She had a sister who had died, and her mother had kept this from her. Why did you say she was buried for my safety? Emma asked, her voice trembling. Because if the truth came out, your life would never be the same, Harold replied, his voice tight with fear. And there are people who still want you, Emma, people who want to finish what they started. Emma's head spun. She had no idea how deep this all ran, but she could feel it now, the weight of her family's past. It was more than just a loss. It was a trap, and she had been walking right into it without even knowing. But the more she learned, the more she realized one thing. Her life, her future, would never be the same again. She had to find out the truth, all of it, no matter the cost. The next morning, Emma woke up in a haze. The events of the previous night, the revelation about her sister, Sarah, and the unsettling connection to Diane and Harold felt like they were pressing down on her chest. Every breath was harder to take, every thought a little more difficult to organize. She had learned something huge, but the truth felt like an anchor, dragging her deeper into the unknown. The camp, once a place of escape, now felt like a prison. Everywhere she looked, she saw shadows of the past, a past she wasn't ready to face, but one that was inescapably hers. Her mind kept returning to the photograph, to the faded date written on the back, to Harold's words, "Your sister didn't make it out alive." What did that mean? What had happened to Sarah? Why had her mother kept the truth from her all these years? And why had Diane and Harold been the ones to carry this burden? Emma spent the morning in a fog, her mind far away from the usual camp activities. When the group gathered for a morning hike, she could barely focus. The conversations of the other campers seemed distant, their laughter and chatter falling on deaf ears. She was lost in her own head, piecing together fragments of a life she never knew. As they walked through the woods, Emma's gaze wandered to the towering trees around her. The world felt larger, more oppressive, as if the entire forest was hiding something from her, something important. Her thoughts were consumed by questions. What was her family involved in? What had her mother been running from? And most terrifying of all, why was she now the target of whatever was still out there? She had to know more, and the only way to do that was to confront the people who knew the answers. Diane and Harold, they were the key to everything. That night, after the group had gathered for the usual campfire, Emma slipped away from the group and headed toward the cabin. The firelight flickered behind her, casting long shadows that seemed to follow her every step. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, but she pushed the thought aside. She had to find out the truth. When she reached the cabin, she hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the door. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but there was no turning back now. The truth was waiting for her inside. The door creaked open, and Emma stepped into the dimly lit room. As she moved through the space, she found herself drawn to the photograph again, the one of the girl who looked just like her. She studied it for a long time, as if trying to extract some hidden meaning from the image, but all she could think about was the name on the back, Sarah, her sister. Suddenly she heard a voice behind her. "You shouldn't be here." Emma spun around to find Diane standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of concern and something darker, something almost regretful. Diane stepped into the room, her eyes fixed on Emma as if she had expected this moment. "Why?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me about Sarah? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Diane didn't answer right away. She walked over to the small table in the corner, where a stack of old letters sat, and began to shuffle through them, her hands trembling. "Because the truth is dangerous," she said quietly. "It always has been." Emma's heart hammered in her chest. "I don't care. I need to know. I deserve to know." Diane sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know you think you're ready, Emma, but the truth, it's not what you think. You have no idea what your family was involved in, what your mother was protecting you from." "Then tell me," Emma demanded, taking a step closer. "What was it? What happened to Sarah? Why did you have to hide all of this from me?" Diane looked up at her, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Because we couldn't protect you, Emma. We couldn't protect Sarah, and we didn't want to lose you, too." Emma felt the ground beneath her feet shift. "What do you mean? What happened to Sarah?" "She was taken," Diane said, her voice breaking, "by the same people who wanted your mother. Your mother was involved in something dangerous, something much bigger than you can imagine. A group that—" She stopped, her voice trembling as she shook her head. "It's a long story, Emma. Too long for me to explain in one sitting. But you have to," Emma insisted, her voice rising. "I need to know what's happening. I need to know why I'm here, why you're here, why my life is being controlled by all of this." Diane's face softened with sorrow. She walked over to Emma, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I wish it were that simple. I wish you could just understand, but it's too dangerous. There are things your mother was involved in, things that should have stayed buried. But you're not safe anymore, Emma. No one is." Emma's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "Because the people who took Sarah," Diane said, her voice shaking with fear, "they're still out there, and they've been watching you ever since you got here. They want you, Emma. They want you just like they wanted Sarah." Emma's head spun. The words didn't make sense, but the fear in Diane's eyes was enough to convince her that whatever was happening was worse than she could ever have imagined. "Why didn't my mother tell me?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why didn't she warn me?" Diane paused, her expression clouded with regret. "Because she thought she was protecting you. She thought that by keeping you in the dark, you would be safe. But now you're in danger, Emma. You always have been." The weight of Diane's words crashed down on her like a tidal wave. Emma was no longer just a normal girl living in a small town. She was part of something far more sinister, something her mother had tried to shield her from, and now the past was catching up to her. Suddenly the door to the cabin slammed open, and Harold stepped inside, his eyes wide with panic. "Diane, we need to go. Now." Diane turned toward him, her face pale. "What's wrong?" "They're here," Harold said, his voice urgent. "We have to leave or it's all over." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Who? Who's here?" "The people who have been watching you," Harold said, his face grim. "They're coming for you, Emma, and this time they won't stop until they get what they want." Emma's mind raced. The past, the danger, everything her mother had kept from her. It was all coming to a head. There was no turning back now. The truth had come for her and there was no escape. Her life was about to change forever. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the words hit her like a slap. "They're here. The people who had been watching her, the people who had taken her sister, Sarah, the people who were coming for her now." The weight of the situation was suffocating, and for a moment, Emma couldn't breathe. She stared at Diane and Harold, her mind racing as she tried to process what they had just said. "We need to go," Harold urged again, his voice urgent. "It's not safe here anymore." "Emma, they're already closing in." Emma didn't move. Her feet felt like they were glued to the ground. She wasn't ready. She couldn't be ready for whatever was about to happen. She had spent her entire life living in the shadow of her family's secrets, but now the truth was barreling toward her and she didn't know how to fight it. "Who are they?" Emma managed to say, her voice shaking. "What do they want from me?" Diane exchanged a quick glance with Harold, as if they were trying to decide how much to tell her. Finally, Diane spoke, her voice softer this time, almost pleading. "We don't have much time. I'll explain everything later, but right now, we have to move." "Why?" Emma asked, her voice rising in frustration. "Why can't you just tell me the truth? Why are you keeping things from me?" Harold's face tightened, and he grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We'll explain everything when we're safe, but you need to trust us. There's no time left." The urgency in his voice broke through Emma's panic, and she allowed herself to be led out of the cabin. The night air was cold against her skin, and the woods around her seemed darker than usual. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the campgrounds. The peacefulness of the place had completely vanished, replaced by a growing sense of danger that was impossible to ignore. Harold led them toward the edge of the camp, where a small, rusted car was parked. Emma's mind raced. This was real. Everything she had been afraid of, the secrets, the lies, the danger, it was all crashing down around her. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing. Her life would never be the same. "We have to get to the cabin on the other side of the property," Diane said as she climbed into the back seat of the car, her eyes scanning the dark woods around them. It's safer there, for now. Harold slammed the door shut and climbed into the driver's seat. Stay down, he ordered Emma as he started the engine. Don't make a sound. They're already searching the camp. Emma's stomach twisted with fear, but she did as she was told. She ducked low in the seat, her heart racing as the car jolted forward, bumping over the uneven ground. The tires screeched as Harold sped down the dirt path, weaving between trees and brush. The headlights illuminated the narrow road ahead, but it felt like the darkness was closing in around them. Who are they? Emma asked again, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engine. Harold didn't answer right away. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his expression hard and unreadable. People who want control. People who think they can dictate your future. And they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. Diane's voice broke through the tension. They've been hunting your family for years. Your mother kept you hidden because they wanted to use you, Emma. She thought if she kept you out of it, they wouldn't come for you. Emma's mind was spinning. But why me? Why did they want my sister? Harold's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Your family wasn't just any family, Emma. Your mother, Sarah, and you were part of something much bigger. Your mother was involved in a network that had power, real power. But that power comes with enemies, and they've been after your family ever since. Emma shook her head. I don't understand. What was my mom involved in? What was she hiding? Harold's voice softened, and for a moment, Emma thought he might finally tell her the truth. But then he glanced in the rearview mirror again, his eyes narrowing. We'll tell you everything when we're safe. Just trust us. They drove in silence for a while, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Emma tried to piece together what little she had been told, but the more she thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. What kind of network had her mother been involved in? What kind of power could they have had? And why had she been kept in the dark all these years? Suddenly, Harold slammed on the brakes, and the car jerked to a stop. Emma shot forward, her seatbelt digging into her chest. She gasped, her heart racing as she looked around. The woods were silent now, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Harold's eyes scanned the dark trees around them. We're not alone. Diane's voice was barely a whisper. They've found us. Emma's stomach dropped. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure. They were being hunted. The sound of footsteps echoed through the woods, followed by the faint rustle of branches. Emma's breath caught in her throat. They were closing in. Whoever they were getting closer. Harold shifted the car into reverse, his hands shaking as he tried to maneuver it. But before they could move, a figure appeared in the headlights. Tall, menacing, and dressed in dark clothes. Emma's blood ran cold. Get down! Harold shouted as he hit the gas, but the figure was already moving toward the car, too quickly to be outrun. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she ducked down, trying to shield herself from whatever was coming. The car swerved, narrowly missing the figure in the road, but as they sped off, Emma heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire. A bullet whizzed by, striking the side mirror, and Emma flinched, her mind numb with fear. They weren't just being hunted, they were being targeted. Harold floored the accelerator, the car racing down the dark, winding road. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she looked back, her eyes wide with terror. The shadowy figure was still there, following them. The chase had begun, and Emma was now in the fight of her life. The car screeched through the winding paths of the woods, the headlights bouncing erratically over the uneven terrain as Harold pushed the accelerator to its limit. Emma crouched low in the back seat, trying to make herself as small as possible, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind raced, a jumble of questions and fear overwhelming her senses. Who were these people? Why were they after her family? And why now? The gunshot from moments ago still echoed in her mind, a piercing reminder that their lives were on the line. They weren't just running from danger, they were running from something far worse. As Harold sped through the woods, Emma caught a glimpse of the shadowy figure in the rearview mirror. The man had been fast, too fast for someone on foot. The figure had easily kept pace with the car, never faltering, and Emma's stomach twisted in terror. This wasn't just a random encounter. The person chasing them was part of something bigger, a plan. Harold's knuckles were white as he gripped the wheel, his jaw clenched in concentration. Diane was silent, her eyes darting nervously to the back window. Emma could sense that they both knew more than they were letting on, but the urgency of the situation left no time for explanations. Whatever answers they had, they weren't going to come easily. We need to lose them, Harold muttered, his voice tight. They can track us. They always can. Emma's mind struggled to process that statement. Track them? How were they supposed to lose someone who could track them so easily? And what did Harold mean by always? What does that mean? Emma whispered urgently, unable to stay silent any longer. Who are they, Harold? Why are they after us? Harold glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of grim determination. I told you, Emma. Your family. You don't know the half of it. Your mother. She tried to protect you from all of this. She kept you hidden, and for good reason. But you've inherited something. A legacy that they'll stop at nothing to control. And they've been watching you for years. Emma's head spun, the weight of his words pressing down on her like a physical force. A legacy? What legacy? She hadn't asked for any of this. She just wanted to be a normal teenager. Someone who didn't have to be chased through the woods by mysterious figures in the dead of night. We're not safe yet, Diane finally spoke, her voice low but filled with urgency. She had been quiet for too long, but Emma could see that she was just as on edge as Harold. We need to get to the cabin. It's the only place we'll be able to regroup. From there we can figure out how to move forward. The cabin. The one on the other side of the property. The one that had been their supposed safe house. Emma didn't say anything in response. Her mind still reeling from the little they'd told her. She wanted answers. But now, in the middle of this chaotic chase, wasn't the time. It felt like they were running out of time, like something huge was coming for them, and they weren't ready for it. Harold glanced at the rearview mirror again, his expression growing darker by the second. They're not giving up. We need to lose them now, or it's over. Just then, the unmistakable sound of an engine revving echoed through the woods, cutting through the silence. Emma's heart sank. Whoever was after them hadn't just been walking, they were in a vehicle now, and that meant they could close in on them even faster. Harold! Diane cried out, a note of panic creeping into her voice. They're gaining on us. The headlights of the pursuing vehicle cut through the trees, flashing through the rearview mirror like an approaching storm. Emma's pulse quickened. It was clear now that whoever was after them wasn't going to stop. They were too close, too relentless. Harold slammed his foot down on the brake, causing the car to fishtail as he swerved hard to the right, narrowly avoiding a tree. The car careened off the main road, crashing into the underbrush as Harold tried to lose their pursuers in the thick forest. The tires slipped and spun, the sound of rubber screeching against dirt and gravel filling the night air. We have to get off the road, Harold shouted, his voice strained with panic. Now hold on. The car lurched forward, but the dense woods were no help. Branches whipped against the sides of the vehicle as Harold fought to maintain control. Emma's stomach dropped with every jolt, her hands clutching the seat as her body bounced around. Diane, in the back seat, was silent now, her face pale and focused. Emma glanced out the back window. The headlights of the pursuing car were still visible, cutting through the trees like a predatory animal tracking its prey. They were gaining and fast. Then, out of nowhere, Harold swerved again, this time driving the car straight toward a narrow path between two large rocks. It was a shortcut, but it was a risk. The car barely squeezed through the gap, the body scraping against the rocks, but it was enough to buy them a few seconds. For a moment the car sped through the forest, the sound of the pursuing vehicle growing fainter. Emma glanced nervously over her shoulder again, but it seemed like they had lost their tail. The path was narrow, and the trees on either side were so thick that it was nearly impossible for the other car to follow. We need to stop, Harold said, his voice suddenly quieter. Regroup. This path is going to dead end soon, and we need to be ready. The car slowly came to a stop in a clearing. The engine idled, and the tense silence that followed felt almost suffocating. Emma's breathing was erratic, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline of the chase. She glanced at Harold, then at Diane, but neither of them spoke. For a long moment, all Emma could hear was the wind rustling through the trees and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The threat was still there, hanging over them, but for the first time in what felt like hours, they were momentarily safe. But Emma knew that this was only temporary. The people chasing them wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted, and they were getting closer. She turned to Diane and Harold, her voice barely above a whisper. What do we do now? Harold let out a long breath, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Now, we prepare. We find a way to fight back. We can't keep running forever. And as the night closed in around them, Emma knew the real battle had just begun. The truth was out there, and no matter how much they tried to run, it would catch up with them soon enough. The clearing was eerily quiet, the trees around them pressing in as if holding their breath. Emma sat in the back of the car, her mind spinning with the barrage of information she had just received. Her whole life had been a lie, a carefully crafted illusion that her mother had built to protect her. And now it felt like the truth was unraveling at a terrifying speed. There was no going back. Diane and Harold didn't say anything immediately. The tension in the air was thick, a suffocating weight pressing down on them as they all sat in silence. The forest outside the car was still, the only sound the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. But Emma could feel it. the danger that was just out of sight, lurking in the darkness, waiting to pounce. Finally, Harold broke the silence. His voice was low, urgent. "We need to make a plan. We can't stay here. They'll find us soon enough." Diane nodded, her face grim. "He's right. They'll be here before sunrise. We have to move." Emma's stomach twisted at the thought. Who were they talking about? Who were these people that had been watching her for so long? Why hadn't her mother ever told her the truth? The questions swirled in her mind like a storm, each one more overwhelming than the last. "What's happening?" Emma asked, her voice hoarse. "Why did you take me to that cabin? What is this legacy you keep talking about?" Harold and Diane exchanged another look, and for a moment Emma could see the struggle in their eyes. They knew the time had come. There was no more running. They had to tell her everything. "Your mother was part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine, Emma," Diane said quietly. "A network of people, powerful people, who wanted to control certain abilities, certain bloodlines." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Abilities? What are you talking about?" Harold sighed, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "It's not just about power, Emma. It's about control. People like your mother and like you have a rare gift. You're part of a bloodline that can change things, the world even. And there are those who will do anything to possess that power." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Her mother, her sister, and now her. She had no idea what Harold and Diane were talking about, but she knew one thing for sure. This was bigger than she could understand, and if she didn't get answers soon, she might not survive long enough to figure it out. "Why me?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why haven't I known any of this? Why didn't my mom tell me?" Diane's eyes softened, but there was sadness in them. "Your mother did what she thought was best. She tried to protect you, but there's only so much hiding you can do. The people who want you, Emma, they've been looking for you your whole life." Harold cut in, his voice sharp. "They found Sarah because she was the key. She had the ability, but she was too young, too untrained. She didn't know how to control it, and they used that. But you—" He paused, meeting Emma's gaze in the rearview mirror. "You're different. You've always been different." Emma's head swam as she tried to absorb the magnitude of what they were telling her. Abilities, bloodlines, powers that could change the world. Her whole life she had been just a regular teenager in a small town, trying to deal with the loss of her grandparents, the loneliness that came with it. And now, suddenly, she was part of something far darker, far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "I don't understand," Emma said, her voice cracking. "What am I supposed to do with all of this? Why me? Why was Sarah taken?" Harold's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Because they knew she was the one who would unlock it. The power. They thought they could control her, use her to get to you. They didn't realize that Sarah couldn't be manipulated. She tried to run to protect you, but she was too young to escape them. They killed her, Emma. They killed her to get to you." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She felt the breath leave her chest as she processed what he was saying. Her sister, Sarah, was dead, and it was all because of her, because of the power she didn't even know she had. The weight of it was suffocating, and Emma felt like she was going to collapse under the pressure. But there was more. She could feel it, the words hanging in the air unfinished. She had to know more. "And my mom?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did she know they would come for me too? Did she know that they'd kill Sarah?" Diane's face hardened, the sadness in her eyes replaced by something darker. "Yes, Jennifer knew. She was trying to protect you, keep you safe, but there's only so much she could do. They've been watching you, tracking you, waiting for the right moment to strike." Emma's mind was reeling. Her mother had known that her sister would die and had kept her in the dark about it all. The betrayal hit her hard, but there was something else gnawing at her, something deeper. "Why didn't she tell me?" Emma asked, the question that had been haunting her since the first revelation. "Why didn't she warn me, prepare me?" Harold's voice softened. "Because she didn't want you to become a target. She didn't want you to know about the legacy until you were ready to fight it, and by the time you were old enough it was too late. They were already on your trail." Emma's hands trembled, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of it all. There was so much more she needed to know, but time was running out. They were still being hunted, and the people chasing them weren't going to stop. They had already killed once, and they would do it again if they had to. "You have to decide, Emma," Diane said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "You're at the crossroads now. Either you fight and learn how to control what you've inherited, or you run and live in fear for the rest of your life. But we can't run anymore. The time for hiding is over." Harold turned to Emma, his face filled with resolve. "This is your fight now. Emma, it's always been yours, and we'll stand by you no matter what." Emma sat back, her heart racing. The decision was hers to make. There was no more running, no more hiding. She had no choice but to fight, and with that decision, the weight of her family's past settled firmly on her shoulders. "Let's go," Emma said, her voice steady. "It's time to end this." And with that, they prepared for the next battle. One that would change everything. The car rumbled through the woods, the once urgent sounds of pursuit now a fading echo behind them. They hadn't seen the vehicle for what felt like hours, and Emma's heart beat slower, steadier. They were gaining a little ground, but she knew better than to think they were out of danger. The shadows in the trees still held their breath, and the night was still heavy with the weight of what they were about to face. Harold kept his eyes on the road, his face drawn with tension, but there was something in his expression now, determination. It was the kind of look someone had when they knew the endgame was near, when there was no turning back, only the fight ahead. Diane sat in the back, her face pale and her lips set in a thin line. They hadn't spoken much since they made the decision. The silence between them was comfortable, but it was also heavy with all the things they still weren't telling her. But Emma wasn't the same girl she'd been when they first left the camp. The fear was still there, but it was different now, sharper, focused. She knew there was no hiding from the truth any longer. The only way out was through, and she had to be ready. "How much farther?" Emma asked quietly, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond the car's headlights. Diane glanced out the window. "Not far, the cabin's just ahead. We'll be there soon." Emma nodded but didn't reply. She wasn't sure she was ready for what awaited her there, but she knew it was the only place where they could make a stand. The only place where they could figure out how to take control of the powers that had haunted her family for so long, and yet, a part of her hesitated. What if there was no way to fight back? What if she wasn't strong enough? What if, in the end, they were all going to be caught just like Sarah had been? Harold seemed to read her mind. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the road behind them. "You're doing the right thing, Emma. It won't be easy, but we'll show you how to control it. You don't have to face this alone." For the first time, Emma turned to face him fully, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. "You said we," she murmured, "but you didn't tell me what you are, Harold. What is this legacy? What's in my blood? I need to know." Harold's expression hardened. He kept his gaze straight ahead. "We'll explain it when we get there. Right now you need to stay focused. The truth is ugly, and it's better that you're ready for it before you hear it. Trust me on that." The silence between them grew heavier, but Emma didn't press him any further. She could feel the weight of the upcoming confrontation, and it was suffocating. The thought of facing whatever awaited her at the cabin filled her with dread, but there was a new, burning resolve within her now. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her sister. It was about her family, and it was about survival. The cabin appeared up ahead, a small, weathered building that seemed to be carved into the side of the hill. It was far more rustic than Emma had imagined, and she realized how little she had truly understood about the world she was now being thrust into. Harold pulled the car into a small clearing next to the cabin, the headlights flickering off as he shut the engine down. The night seemed to swallow the sound of the car, leaving an oppressive quiet. The only sounds were the distant calls of animals and the wind rustling through the trees. Emma's breath caught as they stepped out, the cold air hitting her like a slap. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but there was no going back now. Diane opened the door to the cabin, and Emma followed them inside. The space was dimly lit, and despite its simple furnishings, there was a coldness to the room that seemed unnatural. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for them. Emma stepped further inside, her boots making a soft thud against the wooden floor. The cabin smelled of musty wood and old books, and in the corner she noticed a desk piled high with papers, maps, notes, sketches, diagrams of what looked like some kind of ancient symbols. There were books, too, thick, leather-bound volumes that looked far older than anything she had ever seen. "Sit down," Harold said, motioning to a set of worn chairs around a wooden table. He moved over to the desk and began rifling through the piles of papers, his face unreadable. Diane stayed by the door, her back pressed against the wall as if she were keeping watch. Emma hesitated but did as she was told. She took a seat in one of the chairs, her hands resting in her lap, but she couldn't keep still. Her mind was racing, heart pounding in her chest. Finally, Harold turned to face her, his face a mask of exhaustion. "This is the only place where we can lay low for a while, but this isn't just a place to hide. This is where everything comes together." He stepped forward and dropped a few papers onto the table in front of her. They were diagrams, sketches of what looked like symbols, words written in a language Emma couldn't understand. "Your mother," Harold began, his voice hoarse, "was part of a group, a secret society, a network of people with extraordinary abilities. We called ourselves the Guardians. We were protectors of certain bloodlines. Bloodlines like yours." Emma's pulse quickened. Guardians? A bloodline? This was more than she had bargained for, more than she could wrap her mind around. Your sister Sarah, Harold continued, was the first to show signs of the power, but she was too young, too untrained. She didn't know how to control it. She was caught in the middle of a war between factions who wanted to use that power. But Sarah wasn't just a victim, Diane interjected, her voice sharper than before. She was the key to unlocking everything. And when they found her, they killed her because they knew she was the only one who could lead the next generation. And that generation is you. Emma's heart stopped. She had known it in some way. The weight of this power that she didn't ask for, didn't understand. It was hers now. She was the key. But why me? Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Why not Sarah? Because you're different, Diane said softly, stepping closer to her. You've always been. You were born with the ability to control it, but we couldn't let you know before you were ready. It's too dangerous. Emma stared at the papers in front of her, her hands trembling as she reached for one of the diagrams. The symbols were foreign, but something inside her stirred as she touched them. It was as if they were calling to her. The truth had been laid out before her, in black and white, and now she had to choose how to fight. But there was one question still haunting her. If I'm the key, Emma said, her voice low and determined, then who am I supposed to fight? Who is coming for me? Harold's face darkened as he leaned in closer. They're already here, Emma. They've been watching, and now it's time to finish this. The storm was coming, and Emma was ready to face it head-on. The fire in the small cabin's hearth crackled and popped, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. Emma sat at the table, her eyes glued to the papers scattered in front of her, the symbols, the maps, the explanations that painted a picture she wasn't sure she could fully understand yet, but she had no choice. Everything depended on her now. She could feel it, deep in her bones, the weight of what she had inherited, the power that surged within her. It was like a dormant force waiting to awaken, ready to be wielded. But was she ready to wield it? She turned one of the pages over, her fingers tracing a strange symbol that had been scribbled across the back of the page. A shape she thought she recognized, though she couldn't quite place it. It was as though the symbol was calling to her, urging her to remember something she had long forgotten. But the harder she tried to concentrate, the fuzzier the memory became. Diane watched her from across the room, leaning against the wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't said much since the revelations earlier, her face etched with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. It was part fear, part resolve, and part something darker. Regret, maybe. Harold had gone out to check the perimeter, his every step heavy with urgency. They were close. The enemy was close. Emma glanced at Diane. What did you mean earlier when you said I was different? Diane didn't immediately respond. She pushed off the wall, walked over, and sat beside Emma. Your power is stronger than Sarah's. You were born with the potential to unlock something we haven't even fully understood. The Guardians believed you were the next step. The key. The words stung like ice on her skin. What does that mean? What kind of power are we talking about here? Diane paused. It's not just about control. It's the ability to change things, to alter reality. The power runs deep in your bloodline, but it's dangerous. The reason the others want you is because they believe you can bring about a new order, a new world, but not in a way you would ever want. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. And Sarah? What happened to her? She couldn't control it. Diane's voice softened. And they used her. They manipulated her. The moment she showed signs of the power, they took her. She tried to run, but they killed her before she could unlock what you have. She didn't have the chance to grow into it. The silence stretched between them, thick with grief and anger. Emma clenched her fists, the weight of her sister's death hanging in the air. Because of me. Because of what I might be able to do. Is this what I'm supposed to become? Emma whispered, her voice cracking. A weapon? No, Diane said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You are not a weapon, but you have the potential to change things, to protect those you love. You just need to learn how to control it, and right now that's our only chance. But who's out there? Who's coming for me? Emma asked, her voice rising with desperation. Harold's voice broke in from the doorway. The Syndicate. Emma froze. She had heard whispers about them, in the notes, in the journals, but never in full. Diane's face hardened. They're the ones who killed Sarah. They've been after our bloodline for generations. They believe they can control the power, use it to reshape the world into something unrecognizable. They'll stop at nothing to make sure you join them. Emma turned to Diane. But why didn't you stop them? Why did you let them kill her? Diane's eyes flickered with pain. I failed her, but I won't fail you, Emma. That's why we're here. We can stop them. Emma's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of the decision, the responsibility pushing against her chest. If she didn't stop the Syndicate, They would take everything from her. They would take the people she loved, just like they had taken Sarah, and she wasn't going to let that happen. "Where do we go from here?" Emma asked, her voice steady now, determination settling in her bones. Harold entered the cabin, his face grim. "They'll be here within hours. They know we're here. We can't outrun them anymore. The fight is here, and it's now." He placed a large, worn map on the table, pointing to a location deep in the woods. "We'll need to make a stand. The syndicate has a base nearby. We have one shot at this, Emma. If we don't hit them now, they'll overwhelm us." Emma felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. There was no more hiding, no more running. "What do I need to do?" Harold nodded, his eyes sharp with purpose. "We'll need your power to break through their defenses. The syndicate has cloaked their hideout with old magic, and we can't get through it without your help. You'll have to focus, concentrate on everything you've learned so far. They won't expect it." Emma nodded, even though her heart was pounding, her mind racing. Could she really do this? Could she really unlock the power within her and stop the syndicate? Diane placed a hand on her arm. "Trust yourself. Trust what's inside you. You've already shown you have the strength." Harold turned and grabbed a duffel bag from the corner, throwing it over his shoulder. "Get your gear. We move out in 20 minutes. We don't have much time." Emma's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but she felt something shift inside her, the weight of her family's history, the pain of her sister's death, and the danger they were facing all combined into one sharp, focused point. She couldn't let them down. She couldn't let them take her or anyone else again. In those final moments before they left, as she slipped the strap of her bag over her shoulder, Emma realized the truth. She wasn't just a victim of the syndicate. She wasn't just someone they could use, control, or destroy. She was the key, and she would decide how this ended. Emma turned to Harold and Diane, her eyes steely with resolve. "Let's end this." And with that, they set out into the night, ready to face the syndicate and the battle that would define her future.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Comment where you're watching from, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel.